Hello internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book, and today's book is going to be The Shadow Hour by Melissa Gray. This is the second book in a trilogy. The first book was The Girl at Midnight. So, I like this book a lot better than I like the first book. It kind of goes down a different path than the first book, but I enjoyed the history that I was given. So in the first book, we know that Echo and her whole team of misfits are looking for this thing called the Firebird. At the end of that book, we discover that Echo is the Firebird. The Firebird is an entity that is passed down through different lines of people, and it can be awakened in you, and this awesome power can be awakened. However, as we discover in this book, when you awaken this great good, you also awaken a great evil. So where the Firebird is light, there is a darkness that is also awakened, the opposite of the Firebird. And we start to learn more about the history of the Firebird, and we are in really a race against time to try to figure out as much history as we can about the Firebird, because as far as anybody was aware before all of this was found out about Echo being the Firebird, that was just a myth, a legend, nothing conclusive about it. So all of the knowledge about Firebird is very, very hard to come by. But now this thing called the Kugera, is, I think it's something like that. This dark evil force has been awakened when Echo was awakened as the Firebird, and it is going around ruthlessly destroying things, because where the Firebird can bring peace, this Kugera is only going to bring hardship and suffering, and it is just really destructive. So in the case of this book, the quest is more along finding the history of the Firebird than finding the Firebird itself. That is a slightly different term because we get a lot more of like a historical mind, but it still follows along that same quest path, which I am both okay with but slightly disappointed at, because I really would have liked to explore more of the history itself, really diving into this history. But throughout this book, we only get little hints and clues of just little different snippets they find along their quest of maybe figuring out what this Kugera is, how to defeat it, and so on and so forth. But we never get anything conclusive about the history of the relationship of the Firebird and this evil dark force. So that was slightly disappointing, but because the story seems to follow along, we are going on a quest, and this quest revolves around the Firebird in some sort of aspect. It still fit in within that theme, even though personally I really enjoy delving into the history of worlds and the history of creatures. So in this, the war between the avian forces and the Drakkar are still going on. Echo is acknowledged as the Firebird, and everybody wants Echo the Firebird, because if you control the Firebird, you control the outcome of the war. Now, in this book, we see once again all of our characters, and like I mentioned in the first video about this first book, I really liked how these characters, they come from opposite sides, they were raised to hate each other, and we still see that tension exist. While they've gotten more familiar with each other and more used to each other, you can still see these tensions that exist within these two species and their hatred for each other. Now, with some, it's more recognizable why they don't than with others, like say Echo, who lived as a human and was not really involved in this war, even though she's heard the history. And then with the Dragon Prince, the male one, not his sister, the male Dragon Prince in this book, he also, we find out, because of his love for Rose, and Rose being an avian, he doesn't really have this animosity. But for the other characters, we can still see this animosity exist, like with Ivy. And I don't know why I can't remember any of these Drakkoran characters' names, but with like Ivy and then the second in command to the Dragon Prince. So there's one thing that I'm going to mention about this book that might make or break this book for you, depending on how you feel about love shapes. Now, I'm saying love shapes because there are two love shapes that happen. We have the main character of Echo, the original Dragon Prince, the male twin brother, and then an avian character that was introduced in the first book that Echo is really close to. And we also have Rose. So since the Firebird is passed down through generations of just a bunch of different people, it is kind of like like the Avatar, like you just keep getting reborn in a different person. And if you're the Firebird, you have access to all of your past lives as well. Well, since Rose is the closest one up in Echo's head, she gets a lot of Rose's feelings pushed onto her, so she's not quite sure if her love for this Draconian prince is fully hers or if it's a lot of Rose. She also has these confusing feelings about her avian friend and who was her avian boyfriend, because she, as Echo, really loved this guy. They grew up together. So she's being pulled in two directions because she cares about the avian guy, but she thinks she cares about this Draconian prince, but she's not quite sure if that's Rose. But Rose loves the Draconian prince and the prince loves Rose, but he's also starting to care for Echo, and the two guys aren't really getting along because of the sort of animosity between these two species. So it's like this whole weird love square there, and I liked it, to be honest. I liked how it was handled because I liked how it wasn't like insta love or anything like that, but it was Echo acknowledging, saying, I don't know who I like, because I could never like take into account when I had this avian boyfriend. I could never admit to myself he was my boyfriend. Maybe we are just friends, I'm not quite sure. And then when she's looking at the Draconian prince, she's like, I really care about him, but how many of those feelings are solely mine and me coming to acknowledge this person as a great companion and a potential lover, and how much of it is just Rose's memories affecting my mind. And so I liked how it was handled because it wasn't really pushed on you. It wasn't a bunch of insta love, but it was acknowledging that there is a complicated relationship here that is going to be really hard to dissect. However, we can never really take time to fully invest in it because there's all this other stuff going on with the war. So we get little snippets of it over time of Echo trying to figure out, am I even going to be bothered with this, because I have like 50 other Firebird issues to deal with, let alone a love square that I have to deal with. The more prominent love shape is a love triangle between an avian criminal mastermind kind of character and then the Draconian soldier dude that was in love with the prince. So we kind of see how this relationship works. There is a warlock introduced in this book, so that's how there's a love triangle. They are both going after this avian guy. His name is Jasper. And why do I remember all of the avian characters' names, but I can't remember a single Draconian name? Anyway, the warlock and this Draconian character, they are both after Jasper because they both are very interested in him. Jasper has a past relationship with the warlock, didn't really end well, and Jasper is interested in this Draconian guy. But of course, this guy, he's had a lot of time on the battlefield against avians, so he's really trying to reconcile his past feelings, his past teachings with this new era, and with him seeing all of these avians and actually getting to know them. So I liked how that progressed because there was really a struggle of this guy trying to say, I really like Jasper, I really like who he is, but him trying to struggle to get past his history with the avians and what they did to him in battle, and him just trying to push past that. Of course, by the end of this, we know like what goes down, your ships are fulfilled, but I liked how it wasn't just an instant thing, that this guy was struggling with this, that this was something that he didn't take lightly, and he had to really come to terms with what it would mean if he wanted to move forward into a romantic relationship, let alone that he's moving on from the prince who he has loved for the longest time onto this other character that he's coming to care about as well. So another thing that I want to mention is I like the interesting relationship between the dragon princes. So there are two dragon princes, while that's why that is a really confusing nomer. There are two twins. The original dragon prince is this male that ends up being in this weird love shape with Echo, but there is also a dragon prince who is his sister. Now, they have a very Zuko Azula relationship, except for the fact that their relationship is actually loving. Like, they at one point in time cared for each other. But if like you're familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender, you get the basic gist that Zuko is sort of the tortured soul one who is pushed to do things that he doesn't really see as good, but does it for the sake of his people, and he sort of backs off from that and decides he wants to do something more peaceful down a different path for the sake of his people, while Azula has very, very strict ideas where war is the only way that we're ever going to get happiness for our people. So that's how it kind of works with these two twins. They definitely have a lot more loving relationship with each other. That's just sort of a similarity, and I liked how that played out, where we're seeing these two twins and how they still really care for each other, but they have very, very different ideas of what is best for their people, and this kind of tension going on between them. Well, I didn't quite like how it was handled towards the end, with the Kugera thing being involved and the sister being involved, and then like what happens with the twin relationship at the end of this book that just kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger. I did like that we're going to see this sort of complex relationship where these twins didn't have outright animosity towards each other, but they understood that they had very fundamental differences that were going to stop them from getting along on very, very key and important things. I also like that the Dark Prince was a title, or that the Dragon Prince was a title that was passed on, and it didn't have any specific gender to it. So like that's not like a really important thing, that's just like a thing that I appreciated, which was that this is a title for the ruler, and it doesn't specify which gender can take over, because like that's not important if you're in this thing about a Draconian society. Like gender shouldn't be important, and I liked how it really wasn't about her being a female or anything like that as to why she couldn't take over or why she did take over or what she was doing. It was just a bunch of politics of like who is doing best for our people. So I did like that. So overall, while I did think that this followed along the same quest line as the first book, I would have liked to pause and dig more into the history of the Firebird and this opposing evil force. I did think that that was a really, really interesting thing, and it didn't take enough time to really invest in that and really give us some really juicy bits about it, because it was just kind of glazing over it and only giving you as much information as you kind of needed for the sake of understanding. So that was a little lackluster. I actually liked the love shapes going on in this book, because I think they were handled well without becoming really obnoxious or insta love. Like they weren't trying to pit this on forever just so that you would be sitting there in awe of this dramatic thing. It was done very respectfully. It was done like in a way where you can like actually be like, oh, okay, that's sort of believable as like love shapes are in general. I like this book. I think it definitely improved upon the first book, but that might just be because I like learning history about the worlds that are introduced to me, so I liked that I got more glimpses. But I just really like the exploration of characters in this, and this exploration of the idea of how would you react if your two people are at war, but now there is a darker evil that's coming, and who is willing to face this darker evil together versus who is willing just to worry about their own people and their own gains. So The Shadow Hour is a interesting book. It's a fun book. It's a nice sequel, and it's a book that I read. So if you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those bunnies down below, and goodbye, internet.